Hello and welcome back to Prep Bytes. We were going in and building this complete chat application of ours, and so far we have managed to go in and build out the sidebar that our application is going to go in and need, right? So I also took the courtesy of going in and building these conversation items that you can see over here, right? So I'm going to just quickly take you through on how exactly or what is exactly the process to go in and build this, because we're going to kind of use the same component somewhere else later. So I intend to do so. So let's see how we can go in and do this. All right. So this conversation item, we had just went in and wrote some text as conversation item. So all the one-to-one chats and all the group conversations that you would have had already are going to show up over here, right? So the idea is that we're going to, as we don't know how many conversations a person would have already had, the first thing we need to do is we need to kind of go in and create a template as in such a particular element that can be re-rendered again and again for each and every other conversation. So let's say if I have a conversation with 2 groups and I have a conversation with 3 people directly, so I'll be going and rendering out 5 of these elements, 5 of these conversation items that you see over here. All right. Now, creating up the UI for this particular thing is fairly easy. All right. So as you can see over here, I have the very first item. Okay. So this is the conversation item that we have. So each of the conversation is basically going to be a conversation container, as you can see. So I have multiple containers like these. And I'm just using a bit of, I'm using CSS grid here in order to go in and get this particular arrangement. It's fairly simple. You can either use Flex or you can use grid. It's up to you. But whenever you want to go in and place things on a 2-dimension, grid is basically the best option, right? So just to go in and utilize everything that you would have learned in CSS as well, I just went in and built this particular UI using CSS grids. Okay, so the idea here is really simple. I'm just going to tell you in terms of the layout first and foremost. Okay, so what you can see over here is I've created a table. It's a grid. Okay, grid and a table, same thing. All right. So here I have a grid which has 3 columns and 2 rows. Okay, so if it has 3 columns, you can see I'll have 4 column lines. Okay, you can see the column line numbers. You can also see the row line numbers. So by going in and creating a 2x3 grid, I went in and I placed this icon, the text, the title of the conversation, the last message in the conversation, and the timestamp. Right. So these are the the 3 different information or data that I'm showcasing out over here. So now how exactly did I go and create this? So in order to go in and explain this, let me just directly go in and jump back into my VS Code over here. And if I take it to the main container, okay, so we have a sidebar here. Inside of the sidebar, what I've done is I've created an array of objects. Okay, now the reason here, the reason I've done this is because we don't exactly know how many conversations the person would have had prior to using the app right now. Okay, so let's say if he's using the app right now, we cannot go in and be certain, okay, this is the amount of conversations that the person can have. No, it can vary, right? He can go in and have conversations with a bunch of groups, and the number of groups that he's having a conversation with and the number of people he's having a conversation with can vary. So what we'll go in and do is we'll go in and fetch the data from our database. Okay, so for every person, we're going to go in and specify, okay, so these are the conversations that the person has already had. So we're going to fetch the data from our database. So we'll be making it in the backend. But for the time being though, as we want to go in and create a pretty good UI in the beginning itself, so that we don't have much issue integrating this with our backend later on. Okay, so for the time being, just understand this, that we are going to be fetching these pieces of information, which is going to be the name of the conversation, the last message in that conversation, and the timestamp. Okay, so when did the last message go in and occur? Okay, so these are the information that we're going to be fetching from our database. And for how many of our conversations exist, so if there are like the person went in and had like 50 different conversations, all those 50 conversations, data of all those 50 conversations are going to be fetched from our database, and we'll kind of get it in a JSON format, which is kind of like in the same manner as you see over here. I have a bunch of objects, and each object is going to be representing a particular conversation. So the name of the conversation, the last message in the conversation, and what is the time or when did the last conversation happen, right? So this is basically what each conversation is going to go in and display out. Okay, so what I've done over here is, so I'm taking one data at a time from this array of objects. So in order to do so, what I've done is that I'm using the map function, as you can see. And so by accessing one conversation at a time from my array called as conversations. Okay, so the name of the array is conversation. And I'm saying that each of the item in that array is going to be called as a conversation. Okay, so what we're doing is we're fetching one conversation at a time and then just displaying it out using this item that I've created called as conversation item. Okay, so this is an object, this is another React component that I've created out over here. Okay, and it's fairly simple. So this conversation item component that I created is fairly simple. It has a class called as the conversation container. And then there are 4 things that I'm displaying over there. It's just 4 paragraph elements and that's it, nothing much. And a bunch of CSS so as to make it look good. Okay, so what I've done is each conversation, okay, each of these conversations that you can see over here, right? Each of these conversations is basically just going to go in and display 3 pieces of data along with the icon. Okay, so how exactly did I get the icon? I'll tell you what the idea here is. So rather than going in, so this is kind of going to give us dynamic icons. Rather than going in and putting images, we're creating our own icons here. Okay, so I'll take you through this process. It's fairly simple. So what I have over here is that I have 4 elements. I have the icon, title, last message, and the timestamp. So these are the 4 things that each conversation is going to have, right? So what I've done over here is for the icon, I've taken the first alphabet of the name of the conversation. So every conversation, as you can see over here, is going to have a name, right? So what I've done is I've taken the very first alphabet or the very first character that is there in that group, in that name of the conversation, and I've used it as my icon over here. Now the idea here is fairly simple. Okay, so this is my icon. So I've used a grid area in order to go in and position them in my grid. Okay, so this is my grid container. Okay, this is my conversation container, which I've turned into a grid. And I'm saying that I'll be having 3 columns. First column will be of 32 pixels. It's going to be fixed for the icon. And then 2 other, I went in and I used 2 other columns in order to go in and place the other set of items. And then I'm specifying the number of rows over here and I'm specifying this as auto. So whatever is the amount of space that is required, it'll go in and occupy that. Okay, I added some gap as well so as to put in some margining across all the items in my grid. Added some padding, some margin, and a bit of border radius for that soft edges. Okay, so why exactly this border radius for this element? You might not notice it here, but we're going to go in and need it when we want to do some hover effects on top of it. Okay. All right, so that and all is for the conversation container. And then I have the icon. First thing I've done is I placed it in its correct position using grid area. So if you're unfamiliar with it, here you just need to go in and specify the starting row line number, the starting column line number, ending row line number, and then ending column line number. You can do that. In order to center this text, okay, in order to take this alphabet and put it at the center of my icon. So as you can see, the T is in the very center, right? So in order to do that, what I've done is I've just made it into a flex container and used justify content center and align item center. Got to give it some background color and a bunch of properties for the fonts. Okay, so this is for the font. And for the overall circular icon, I went with the same design. So I just gave it some fixed height and width of 32 pixels and 32 pixels. So that, even if we go in and we increase the size up or anything by a bit, it would still go in and maintain the correct ratio. And then we have our border radius set down to 50%. This is so as to make it circular. Okay, we wanted to go in and make it circular. So we gave the border radius of 50%. And then again, justify self and align self for aligning itself within the cell. Okay, so within the grid, I have a particular cell allotted for this particular icon. And I use justify self and align self to put it at the very center. I've done the same exact things for the title, last message, and for timestamp as well. So by using this grid area property, if you want, you can use grid row property and grid column property separately. It's up to you. I've used grid area because you can just kind of go in and place it anywhere you need with a single CSS property. Okay, so once that is done, we would go in and end up with something that looks like this. All right, so let me just zoom out a bit and I'm going to turn off this overlay. All right. And now the best thing about this would be that, now we can go in and, we have a proper solid sidebar for our application. Okay. Now, we still haven't done any media queries as in such. We haven't optimized this for our, what should I say? We haven't optimized this much for the sake of our mobile view. So we'll be doing that in the upcoming video. Okay, so for the time being though, I'll say, yeah, we have a pretty decent, like, even if I zoom out, let me just take it out of here. So even if I zoom out, you can see everything just goes in and sizes out accordingly. Okay, so now it's in 125% zoom. So this is 100% zoom. So this is how it would normally look. Even if you're zooming in, no issues, the elements, we can go in and make it so that these elements go in and stay within the containers that it has. All right. Okay. So now what we can go in and start working on is our main work area. Okay. So this work area, I'm going to be swapping this out with multiple components. Okay. So according to the design idea that we have, all right, this work area is going to go in and get swapped out. So initially there will be a welcome page here. We're going to be building all of these components. Initially there's going to be a welcome page here, and then there will be a chat, this chat area, and there will be another area which will go in and show all the live online users, another area which will go in and show all the online groups. So this is kind of the case here, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to be going in and building all of these components out. We'll be doing a time lapse as in such, so that we don't waste much time in just going in and coding this out. So once I build the same, I'll go in and explain the whole structure to you, and so we can keep on building the application together. Okay. All right, fine then. So now moving on. So the idea here is the right hand side of the sidebar, which is our work area, should go in and swap out different components, right? Initially, it will be a welcome component. Then it will be a chat area component. Then we'll create another component to display all the online users and so on and so forth. All right. So we'll go in and start building these components now. Okay, so we're going to start with our main focal point, which is going to be the chat area. And that's what we're going to be building in this particular session. Okay, so we're going to go in a bit on the faster side. Let's try to go in and create this out here. And once we build it, we'll go in and start building the other set of components that are needed. Okay. All right. So now what we can do is let's just directly jump back into our VS Code here. Okay. I'm going to close the conversation items. We're not going to be needing it altogether. I'm going to close down the sidebar as well. Now, what we want to work on is creating up these containers, these additional containers that are going to go in and occupy the work area. So it's going to be replacing the work area. Okay. So for the time being, though, I haven't done much. I just went in and I created this class called as work area. So we're going to go in and we'll be utilizing this. Okay. So I'll say we'll keep on swapping this out. So depending on what is to be displayed to the side of the sidebar, we'll be going in and swapping out. Okay, we'll be creating an outlet here, courtesy of React.DOM, which will go in and swap out different components to the side of the sidebar. Okay, so for the time being though, I will say that we are going to go in and start with the chat area. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and remove this thing out, and I'm going to create a new component now. And we'll call this as chat area.js. So this is going to be our chat area component, the chat area main component that we have, right? So I'm just going to create a basic chat area from this. Okay. And now another thing I'll go in and do initially is that, okay, I don't think we'll be needing the work area component anymore. So I'm just going to remove it. Let's just remove out all the clutter. Okay. So I'm going to delete this particular work area, and I'm just going to keep my, I'm just going to go in and keep this chat area component alive. Okay. I'm going to remove this as well so that we don't have any errors. Okay. We do have a few warnings because we aren't using a few bunch of icons. Okay. And also in terms of the for loop that I'd used over there, I had to specify the key, which I'll go in and take care in a minute. Okay, so for the time being though, let's just go in and get this chat area component here. So I'm going to say chat area. So automatically gets imported out. So we brought it in. In the chat area, we're going to start with creating our main container. Okay, so class name is equal to chat area container. Okay, we're going to go in and add this in. And instead of work area container, we're going to say chat area container. All right, so chat area container. I'm going to save this up. Okay, so now if I go in and take you back to my browser here, let's see what our output is. So you can see our chat area is live right now. If I go in and inspect this, you can see that, yeah, the chat area is occupying the overall right hand part for the time being. So similar to this, we're going to create a bunch of other areas which we're going to be going in and swapping out. Okay, so I'm going to just bring this back in, and I'm going to quickly take care of that that warning, that error that we're getting in our browser, right? So just give me a quick second. Now, as we are rendering out each and every other item here, what we'll do is we'll just give it a key, which we can go in and set as our conversation dot. I'll just put conversation dot name. So every conversation is going to have a new name. Okay, so probably by that we would be able to go in and prefetch it. Okay, so there you go. Now if I go in and take you back to the browser, we should be able to go in and get this. Yeah, so we fixed that particular error, okay, of rendering out each of these elements. So that is fine. So all we had to do was just add in this property called as key. Okay, now, okay, there's one more, which is logo 192.png. I think it's still going in and getting loaded. It might be there in index.html. We'll fix it in later. Okay. All right. So now moving back, let's start going in and creating our chat area, component. Okay. So let's just go in and see how exactly are we going to create this chat area of ours, right? Okay. So the chat area is going to go in and have, so I'm just going to go in and make a copy of this and let's put it over here. So the chat area is going to go in and have a header at the top, okay, so which will go in and have an icon and also the name of the group and a small trash icon at the end. And then we're going to need another one, which is going to be for the main messages. Okay, so we'll make a messages container here. So all the messages that are being sent from one person to another are going to go in and appear up here. All right. And so this is going to be a messages container. I'll just put it up over here. And then at the bottom, we need an input box, right? So that's a place where you'll go in and click and type in your text and press on the button to go in and send it. Okay, so this is going to be our next area, okay, which is going to be our, I'll say, message, or I'll say text input area. Okay, let's just say text input area. Okay, text input area. Okay, so these are the three components that we'll have to go in and create for our chat area. So we'll have a chat area header, then a messages container, and we'll go in and have a text input area as well. Okay, so I think this would be fairly simple. We can just go in and create a bunch of divs because they are anyways going to be block level elements. So we'll just go in and create 3 divs for chat area header, message container, and then for our text input area. Once that is done, we'll go in and so we need the messages container to go in and take up the most amount of the whatever space it is, that is available. So majority of the space is to be taken by the messages container. So what we can do is we can go and achieve this by using a bit of flex. Okay, so let's just go in and get this part done out. Okay, so I'm going to directly jump into VS Code and I'll quickly make that particular UI part. Let's just set up the layout first and then we can start building it. Okay. Okay, so this is what we have managed to go in and build up so far, right? I haven't went in and done much altogether. The idea was to just go in and create 3 sections in our chat area. So I have my header, I have my messages container, and I have the input area. So for the time being, the amount of height that they're taking up is only required for whatever the content that is present inside of it. And I've made the messages container over here to go in and occupy whatever is the maximum amount of height it can go in and occupy by just using a bit of flex. Okay, so in order to just go in and see what exactly is happening in here altogether, let me just go in and show you the code that we written. Okay, so the entire chat area is a flex container, as you can see. All right, and the things I've done is I went in and I've set the flex direction as column so that it would go in and arrange all the items inside of this chat area container. Okay, so you can see I'm inside of my chat area container. So I wanted all the items to be arranged in column. So by default, even if it was a div, it would have done that. But the main reason why I'm going in and using flex is to make this messages container here to go in and occupy the maximum available height it can within its container. So within the chat area container, I want the messages container to go in and occupy the maximum amount of height as well. Okay, so in order to do so, what I've done is I've used this flex grow property. And so what would happen is the amount of height given to header and input area would be, it would be lesser, okay, or it would be only for whatever is required by its content. And all the other available height is going to be occupied by our messages container, as you can see. Okay, so even if I take it to the side, you can see the messages container will still go in and occupy the majority of the available height, and the other two containers are only occupying height required for its content, right? Okay, so now what we can do is we can now go in and move back and start building up our header, our messages container, and our input area. Now, for creating this header, it would be fairly easy. All we want is this icon thing, the chat, because here again, the data is going to be dynamic. So we cannot just go in and throw in some data and hope that this would go in and work out. That is not going to happen, right? Because the top bar should also go in and change depending on with which group you're having the conversation and with which person you're having the conversation, right? So we'll be going in and doing it the same exact way. We build our conversation items so that we can go in and pass some particular data, which is going to be the name of the conversation, the whether the conversation is, when the last conversation had went in and occurred. So the same bit of messages, I would say, it's going to kind of have similar structure as that of the conversation items that we created, and then a small trash icon onto the rightmost side. Okay, so we can go in and get this trash icon, I would say, from material UI icons back again, and then we can go in and build the same. Now, in order to go in and achieve this particular layout, I'll again be going in and using Flex. If you please, you can go in and use grid as well. Okay, it would be completely up to you on how exactly you want to go in and build this. So I'm going to be using in Flex and building the main chat header, post which we're going to go in and create two of the components for messages sent by the user. Okay, so the green one will be the messages sent by the user, and this grayish one will be the messages that are sent by the other people who are there in the conversation. Okay, so this is going to happen. We're going to put in some icons here as well. All right, so I think that can be fairly easily done, and then we'll have a small input box at the very bottom. Okay, so we'll just go in and quickly build this, and we'll discuss upon the design. All right, there we go. So I'm going to just quickly go in and switch back to VS Code, and we're going to quickly just go in and build this. Okay, so here again, just a quick recap. So what I've done here is I had this chat container, right? So I made it as Flex, and inside of this, I have the chat area header, I have the messages container, and the input text input area. So I just given it some background color just so that you guys can go in and see. And here I'm just going in and setting the flex grow property to 1 so that the messages container would occupy the maximum available height. Okay. All right. Fine. So now we can go in and get into building up our chat area header and the remaining rest of the components.